and welcome to Budget 101, session number 6. This is the evening that we are going to talk about how our money is spent in all the capital projects that we do. So this has been a 6-part series, and we've had a little bit of technical difficulty.
Hello,
here.
I'm Tom Edelman, Deputy Director of Finance in the Office of Management and Budget.
This is not where we want
The
to be
purpose
right
of this
now.
presentation is to help explain how projects in a capital spending plan, often referred to as a CSP,
Right.
ultimately
We
result
learned
in
about
debt
the
service
CSP
payments
earlier,
from
but
Metro's
that's not what
operating
we're
budget.
doing now.
I will spend the next few minutes discussing what a capital spending plan is, how projects within the plan are initially financed,
This is good
the
information,
long-term
but not what we're
financing
doing
of those
tonight.
projects, and the annual debt service payments required.
Yeah.
When you hear that a capital spending plan is being proposed by the mayor for consideration of the council, a first question may be, what are the projects?
Great. Technical difficulties here. Give us just a moment. All right, let's try this one. All right, I'm going to skip my part, at least showing you. What we've done every session is talk about where our money comes from, which is largely through sales, through property tax, and then the next piece is sales tax. And then we have spent the last 3 weeks talking about the largest chunks of our budget, and that includes Metro Schools is the biggest piece. That's 38% of what we spend our money on. Then public safety, and then infrastructure, and health and recreation, and other sectors. And tonight we're going to be talking about debt service, which is currently 13 to 14% of our operating budget, depending on how you calculate that. So we have 3 speakers. Greg Claxton from Metro Planning is going to talk about the capital improvements budget process, which is how any project that people would like to do gets on the list to start with, and then that's turned into a capital spending plan project. And that then has to be ultimately financed through bond issues, which become part of our debt service that we pay every year. And Michelle is going to explain that to us. And then we have a new focus within our budget this year. And Srineth Patel is going to talk to us about the new equity lens that we're going to be using for our budget. So I am going to turn this over to Greg Claxton and hope that he is better at getting his program up on the screen than I am. So good luck to you, Greg. There.
Okay. All right. Good evening. Thanks, Councilmember. My name is Greg Claxton. I'm the Advanced Planning and Research Manager for the Planning Department. I'm going to talk through how we go about assembling Metro's capital improvements budget every year. In terms of the capital improvements budget, we consider a capital improvement to be any building, structure, work, or improvement with an average life over 10 years and a cost greater than $50,000. So these are long-term investments that stick around for a number of years. Now, in some cases, this includes smaller projects that kind of get bundled together into kind of larger purchases that are around for a while, but generally think of land, property, vehicles, construction, that sort of thing. Now, Metro's capital improvements budget operates a little differently than the CIB in other cities. It works as kind of a list of things Metro could spend money on, but it doesn't actually allocate money to those projects. And so, for example, the fiscal year 2020 CIB included over 1,000 projects requesting $11 billion over the next 10 years. The chart on the right shows how that breaks down across each of those years. That's far more than Metro is going to spend, but it sort of becomes a place where all of the different needs and projects that departments and council members are interested in pursuing can all be seen together and compared against one another. And so the way this works in practice is that any capital improvement that Metro makes must be included in the CIB. However, like I said, inclusion in the CIB does not guarantee funding. So the CIB really only lays out what Metro could spend money on. As you'll hear later, you need some other council action allocating money through general obligation bonds, usually referred to as a capital spending plan or CSP. Some departments, particularly water services, issue revenue bonds that fund projects backed by their revenue. And then there are some miscellaneous other sources, such as 4% funds for equipment and that sort of thing, enterprise funds, people's department's operating budget, and then occasionally federal or state funding. Now we assemble and readopt the capital improvements budget every year. It usually starts around October through January, where council members make requests and set their own priorities for their districts. Then January to February, departments submit their requests. The planning department brings all of those together and starts working through them. We produce a draft CIB, usually in April, and then by the end of April, the Planning Commission votes to recommend the CIB to the mayor. In May, the mayor releases his draft of the CIB, and then in June, the council votes to adopt it. The CIB always includes at least 6 years of projects, but because it's readopted every year, it's only binding on that first year. So the CIB is structured into several sections. There's an introduction and sections that sort of list projects by their funding source, either the Urban Services District or the General Services District. The introduction includes just sort of general ways that we provide to help people make sense of where these requests are coming from and what kinds of projects they are. The bulk of the document, however, is in Section 3, what we call project details. And here is sort of the key listing out of each project. So in the upper right, you'll see every project has a project ID, so 19DS0004, a project title and description, so constructing sidewalks on Central Pike. And then below that is the funding request. Also for each project we show kind of the assessment that we do. I'll get into that in more detail in a moment. But one of the core things that we think we bring to the CIB is helping bring all of the different perspectives on these projects together. And so what we've done is we've grouped all of the different folks who set priorities for capital projects together. So the Planning Commission's priority is listed. Each department, thank you. Each department's priority is listed for as they request each project, and then a council priority. If council members or department has prioritized a project, those are shown here as well. And so what this does is brings together like all of the different views on these projects so that they can be kind of seen all at once. In addition, one of the things that we've tried to do with the CIB over the last few years is to make it more understandable by thinking in terms of overarching programs, things that departments do over and over and over again. So this chart shows how projects are grouped into those overarching programs. So MNPS, if you look at their CIB request, you'll see a lot of individual school renovations or school expansions. We've grouped those so that you can see all of the renovations together and how those time out, all of the expansions and how those time out. And then similarly for parks, whether it's parkland acquisition, general parks improvements, community centers, that sort of thing. And then you can see water and sewer, transportation, library, and fire. All told, these programs account for a little over half of the CIB. So they are very significant, and trying to organize around these, we think, makes the CIB more understandable. So in terms of the commission's role in particular, in addition to just assembling all of the projects and putting the document together, the Metro Charter tasks the Planning Commission with providing a report and recommendations. It doesn't say what kinds of recommendations those should be, what we should base it on, but if you look at the other powers granted the Planning Commission from the Charter, it's things like making the general plan for the physical development of the government area, adopting a zoning plan, making plan for conservation, improvements and renewal of neighborhoods, that sort of thing. So as we look at the capital improvements budget every year, one of the things that we look back to is NashvilleNext. So this is Nashville's long-range comprehensive plan to guide growth, development, and preservation over the next 20, 25 years or so. was initiated and initially adopted by the Planning Commission in 2015. It is a very, very extensive document with a lot of different parts and components. It's also something that we try to keep up to date. So we did an update in 2017 to reflect some of the other master plans that other departments had done. In terms of the capital improvements budget, there are two key pieces that we look to when we think about Nashville Next. The first is a set of what we call guiding principles. These are the big overarching things that we heard Nashvillians want for the future of Nashville. So ensuring opportunity for all, expanding accessibility, advancing education, and being true to Nashville. As we think about those criteria, what we've done, or think about those guiding principles, what we've done is identified a set of criteria that are relevant to capital projects and sort of fleshed out how those connect and help to assess whether projects are helping move Metro towards this future. And so as an example, here's the guiding principle for foster strong neighborhoods. And we've broken that out into things like community services and looking to see whether a project is adding new services, just improving or expanding services at an existing facility, or just preserving what's there. Similarly for health, we look at whether facilities are directly supporting health or healthy activities, like a health clinic, or it's infrastructure that allows or supports healthy activity, like a sidewalk or a greenway. And then we also think about things like community aesthetics and whether we're making an intentional effort to improve the appearance of an area, such as through streetscaping or public art, general improvement in appearances, such as sort of adding curb and gutter to a road and putting a sidewalk in and putting tree planting, or just doing maintenance and facility upkeep. The other thing that we look at when we think about kind of how projects relate to Nashville Next is what we call the growth and preservation concept map. This lays out at a very, very high level Nashville's overall approach to how we heard the community wants to manage growth. And so there's a lot of areas that we heard folks want to preserve, whether it's rural areas, open spaces, or sort of our large, predominantly neighborhood areas. And then there are areas that we want to grow, such as our key activity centers like downtown or midtown, and then the transit network feeding into that. And so one of the things that we do is assess for any project that we can map how that relates to the growth and preservation concept map. Is it helping supporting kind of these high quality, vibrant neighborhoods that we know are important to people? And then the last thing, not explicitly spelled out in Nashville Next, but we know there are some just fundamental key sort of good government, efficient government factors we need to be mindful of. And so, prioritizing facilities that are currently in poor condition, prioritizing things with a project need of expanding services where they're deficient, recognizing a lot of departments do a lot of master planning, recognizing those efforts, whether they leverage outside funds, that sort of thing. All told, once we've done that analysis, we look across a range of factors as we think about setting Planning Commission's recommended priorities. And so we don't just stop at Nashville Next. That's one component out of many. We also look at things that are unique to each project, such as a legal mandate, or there's already been a decision at council to pursue one thing or another. We look at department priorities, council member priorities, and then if there are any coordination opportunities. And so out of that, Planning Commission assigns one of these letter recommendation to every project in the CIB. So there's a small number of projects that we say, this is recommend as planned. There's a much larger set of projects that we say kind of recommend as planned if funding is available. The project's in line with Nashville Next, but it's not as high a priority as the A projects. There's a small number of projects where we say some further work is needed here. There's some reconsidering that's needed. And then there's a large number of projects that we just consider to be outside of the scope of what the Planning Commission can do. So for example, most ITS, sort of technical requests for end-of-life computer systems are outside of our scope. Equipment for General Hospital is something we don't bring any expertise to, that sort of thing. And then occasionally we do identify a project that we think is out of step with the general plan, and we recommend that it not be funded until either the general plan or the project are changed so that they're brought into alignment. This is usually road expansions that are beyond what's called for in the Major and Collector Street Plan. And so as an example, here are the kinds of projects that the Planning Commission recommended for that A-level recommend as planned in last year's capital improvements budget. First, there's a set of projects whose funding is already secured. They just sort of show that they're programming through the CIB. Then there's a set of what we think of as core asset protection programs. So public works state of good repair program, different departmental maintenance programs, that sort of thing. There's a set of current commitments that reflect some prior council action, such as annexing a part of the county into the USD. And then there's a set of other recommended projects that for one reason or another, sort of we felt rose to being recommendable. On the right, we show how year by year in the 6-year CIB, those recommendations connect to actual funding requests. So you can see the recommended projects from the Planning Commission on the bottom in dark blue. That's a small proportion of the overall requests. You can see that light blue area, those B recommended projects are the vast majority of what's in there. Those are fine projects. They may be appropriate to fund, but they didn't seem to rise to us to that same level of priority. And then the projects that are outside the scope, or one project in this case that is we feel is out of step with NashvilleNext. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Claxton. I am excited to say we have an audience now, so if there are any questions from the audience, please write them on the cards on the lectern, and we'll send a runner back there. We'll have to designate one. But I do, before you hop up, I do have one question. If you could just briefly get us through the process of how, if it is the Planning Commission's responsibility, the master plans all have their prioritizations for, I mean, there's a sidewalk master plan, there's a park master plan, there's a transit master plan, I believe, and then the council will go through the process in the coming weeks of prioritizing, you know, what our neighborhoods and districts have said is important to them. Does the Planning Commission look at all those prioritization projects when you come up with that decision about what's in that blue category of we think you should do it?
We do. We do try to take a look at all of the different ways of potentially what makes something a priority project. So, like I said, those project-specific factors, department's own priorities, and the council priorities are part of that review.
So you do take all that into account. That's great. And then if you can just say, in your words, people frequently ask us how things then go from the capital improvement budgets to the capital spending plan, and it's a little bit of an art, I think, and there's some opportunity of there's some massive federal grant that will make it great to do this because we can leverage our dollars or whatever. So it's not fully just taking those numbers and turning it into something. Can you comment at all from the planning perspective how you see things going from your recommendation into the capital spending plan, which we're going to talk about next?
What I can say is actually pretty limited because once we've made our recommendations, we're not really closely involved in the actual developing the final capital spending plan. Developing those recommendations is kind of our opportunity to provide input there.
So then that's the information that's given to the administration to use and take other things into consideration.
That's correct.
Thank you. I think, Ms. Hayes, if I can ask you to help me out here, is there a question? There is not a question from the back, so you don't have to run back there, so we're great. Thank you so much for that information. I'm going to make sure that all the council members on the Budget Committee watch that before Monday so they can hear the same thing twice maybe, but then it'll sink in better. But that's helpful information for everyone to understand how we figure out what projects are the top priority.
Of course.
So with that next,
thank you.
I would like to invite Ms. Michelle Bosch up to then take us from, we've decided these things need to be built and we want to start building them, and how do we actually make that money be in the right place to be spent?
Thank you.
Take it away. And if you'll lean into the mic so everybody can hear us well, that would be great.
Thank you. Good evening. This is Michelle Bosch. I am the Metropolitan Treasurer, and thank you. We will, you've just heard how our Planning Commission is charged with putting together that capital improvement budget, and our office is charged with facilitating the funding as it relates to municipal debt for the capital spending plan. So we're just going to go through that in this presentation.
Hello, I'm Tom Edelman, Deputy Director of Finance in the Office of Management and Budget. The purpose of this presentation is to help explain how projects in a capital spending plan, often referred to as a CSP, ultimately result in debt service payments from Metro's operating budget. I will spend the next few minutes discussing what a capital spending plan is, how projects within the plan are initially financed, the long-term financing of those projects, and the annual debt service payments required. When you hear that a capital spending plan is being proposed by the mayor for consideration of the council, a first question may be, what are the projects? A capital spending plan is the identification of projects that have been selected to be funded and move forward. The projects are selected from a capital planning document called the Capital Improvements Budget, or CIB. The CIB represents a long-range planning process that identifies potential capital projects needed across Metro. The CIB is managed by the Planning Department and updated annually by the resolution of the Metro Council. Projects selected for inclusion in the capital spending plan must be on the CIB. Each capital spending plan cycle includes an evaluation of projects that are priorities of the mayor and council, with a final spending plan resolution adopted by the council. Capital spending plan resolutions also have another purpose, which is to meet the requirement of state law to adopt an initial bond resolution. Since projects included for a capital spending will be financed through general obligation bonds, the beginning clause of the adopted resolution reads, "Initial resolution determining to issue general obligation bonds of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County." This might be a good time to define general obligation bonds. Through various federal, state, and local laws, municipal governments, such as Metro, are authorized to issue general obligation debt. These are debts secured by the full faith and credit of the local government. The government pledges its tax revenues unconditionally to pay the interest and principal of the debt. At the time a CSP is adopted by resolution, Metro has pledged and obligated itself to pay any expenses associated with these projects that result in issuance of general obligation bonds. In addition, Tennessee law requires that Metro's annual operating budget include the revenue required to pay debt service, again, the pledge of necessary tax revenue. Once a capital spending plan has been adopted by council, a public notice is placed in a newspaper. Accounting records are updated for the approved budget for each project. Notice is provided to the responsible departments, and projects may begin. At this point, financing of individual projects has not started, but the authority has been given to incur expenses. Metro uses its commercial paper program to initially fund project expenses. Commercial paper is often discussed, but let me explain what this program really is. State law authorizes the use of bond anticipation notes for project financing. These are short-term obligations used to raise the cash for project expenses. Metro's commercial paper program is our method of issuing bond anticipation notes. The program is established by council resolution and includes agreements with participating parties. The terms of the program are established in the resolution and are for a specified period of time. Each new or renewal agreement requires a new authorization. Commercial paper can only be used for expenses approved in a capital spending plan. There is no additional spending authorization by using commercial paper. The total amount that can be borrowed is first limited by the amount authorized for capital spending, and then by the maximum amount authorized for the commercial paper program. Metro Finance manages the issuance of these notes to ensure cash is available as project expenses are incurred. When available cash has been used, a new initial note is issued for the next few months of projected expenses. The notes have a short duration, and at maturity they are resold. This process continues until Metro issues bonds to pay off the outstanding notes. Commercial paper notes are not tied to individual capital spending plans or to single projects. As each project moves toward completion, its expenses are tracked individually. However, all projects use the same commercial paper funding source. From the time of the initial expense of projects through completion, commercial paper has been borrowed to cover costs. This can, and most of the time does, mean that multiple capital spending plans and projects are included in outstanding commercial paper. Timing of completion of capital projects can vary widely. For example, purchase of heavy equipment may be completed within months of approval, but a new facility that includes land acquisition, design, and construction could take several years. This illustrates how financing a single capital spending plan can take several years, and borrowing only occurs as projects have expenses. When commercial paper capacity is reaching its maximum limit, the process to issue bonds begins. This will ultimately remove the debt from short-term to long-term financing. Once bonds are issued, the commercial paper notes are paid off. All the projects from any capital spending plan included in the outstanding commercial paper will be part of that bond issue. Bonds are generally issued with a final maturity of 20 years, resulting in annual debt service requirements for the length of the bond. At bond issuance, the interest rate and principal retirement schedule is determined. This schedule becomes the annual debt service requirements to pay off the bonds. The annual debt service requirements for a new bond issue is combined with debt service of all prior bond issues. Metro's total annual debt service requirement is the amount of principal and interest to be paid for all of the outstanding series of bonds. Remember that it all starts with the capital improvement budget and a capital spending plan. Commercial paper provides the short-term cash to pay project expenses, and bond issues become the long-term financing, and the annual debt service is the final step to pay for bond-funded capital projects. Thank you for listening, and I hope this has been helpful.
So now that you've seen an overview of how we fund the capital spending plan, I'll dive a little bit deeper into the types of debt that we typically issue for our municipal government. So in general, the general obligation bonds, or GO as we refer to them, are debt obligations backed by the full faith and credit of the metropolitan government. The interest and principal payments, also known as debt service, just as you've heard, is paid out of ad valorem taxes collections in Davidson County. Metro Council authorizes the sale and structure of these bonds. Now, for water and sewer revenue bonds, the payments of the principal and interest comes from revenues received from charges to the users of the system. For the Sports Authority revenue bonds, that's for projects that are approved by the Sports Authority and Metro Council. The principal and interest payments come from the revenues. Equally for the Convention Center bonds, those are also projects that are approved by the Convention Authority and the Metro Council. Tourism taxes are the revenues used to pay for that debt service. Now, in the case of Sports Authority and the Convention Center, those bonds are also backed by the non-tax revenues of the metropolitan government. And lastly, for commercial paper, as you've heard, it's our short-term debt until we can issue bonds, also known as bond anticipation notes. And these are authorized by state law and approved by Metro Council. Now, in terms of debt structure, in determining the timing and type of sale, we take into consideration the amount of commercial paper outstanding, the debt service requirements, the current bonds market, and in the case of refunding bonds, the ability to generate savings. In this case, we review the sales type that we would like to go into. We have a couple options. One of them is negotiated, and that's basically a system where it's a fast, a more efficient, with a higher probability of closing the deal. And this creates an optimal structure to draw investor interest for us. With a competitive sale type, it's a bids process where the best price wins. It may create better pricing, but it has less flexibility with sale date and hard to adjust changes in the market. Now, all of this happens through a very strong financing team that includes not only the finance department, but also other stakeholders as listed here. And while there are many stakeholders, Metro Finance is more than just a participant in the sale of the bonds. Metro is the owner of the transaction and the obligor of the debt until maturity, which is typically, like you heard, around 20 years. Metro Finance is not only heavily involved in the transaction, but also in the post-closing timeframe as it relates to continuing obligations with compliance and reporting after we've issued the debt. Now here you'll see a flow of funds, and just to delineate exactly how it is that the Metropolitan government receives the funds for the capital spending plan, the underwriter, which is the banker that is involved in the transaction, will seek out investors, and investors will provide bond proceeds to the bankers. In turn, we execute the transaction, and the bond proceeds come back to the Metropolitan government that we then use to purchase assets or build projects, sidewalks, buildings, etc. In turn, after we've received the funds, we have to pay back the debt. So then the bond payments or the debt service go back to a trustee or a bank who holds the funds until they are due and then make sure that it gets distributed ultimately to the investor. Now, after we've issued municipal debt, there is lots more work to be done by the Finance Department. We're obliged to submit continuing disclosures to the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, and we also have to comply with federal tax rules. In addition to that, there's reporting requirements that are due to the state of Tennessee, rating agencies, bankers, and others. We also monitor all of the covenants that we agreed to in the bond agreements and the documents to make sure that we're complying with what we said we were going to do. And then ultimately, we also review the debt portfolio on a regular basis to make sure that we can find, if we can find savings in refunding the portfolio. That's my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Thank you so much. I have questions. There may be some from the back. If so, wave them, and we'll come grab them and bring them up. I'll start with my questions if I can. When you say issue a note on the commercial paper, does that go to a bank, or who do we issue that note to?
So it's issued in the public markets, and so what that means is we use a banker that will help us sell the paper, and the banker will go out to the public markets and find investors to purchase the commercial paper for us.
Gotcha. So someone gets a piece of paper from us that says, we promise to give you money once we sell our bonds.
A virtual piece of paper, yes.
A virtual piece of paper. Very good. Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. The multi-talented Kelly Flannery. There may be a few more questions because she's bringing one up. Don't run away yet. Thank you. So that another question I'll ask while I'm waiting for this one is, as interest rates are going up, is that going to affect the timing of whether we issue the next bond faster or slower, or how do we take into account the fact that interest rates may not stay as wonderfully low as they've been for years?
That's right. So that is one of the components that we do look at, is the market conditions and when we issue bonds. To some extent, there's a little bit of flexibility in terms of how quickly we issue them within months, but the reality is it really depends on the balance of the commercial paper program and how fast we're spending funds for capital spending projects. And if we've expended all of our commercial paper capacity, we have to issue bonds. You know, now we have a little bit of flexibility in terms of one day over the other, if it's a bad market day, particularly with negotiated deals. But in general, it's just a component.
So we could issue them early, perhaps, but we can't issue them once we hit that limit on our commercial paper. Then it's definitely time.
That's right.
At that point, if we want to keep building.
That's right.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. So here's a question from the gallery, which we appreciate. What happens in general when a city defaults on a debt? Has Nashville ever defaulted?
Yes. So Nashville has never defaulted, and what typically happens is the first thing that happens, you get downgraded by the credit rating agencies, and bells and whistles go off in all of the markets, in the public market. What typically happens then, you have to go into what presumably, you know, if that were to happen here, we would have to find a funding source to cover the debt. If Metro Nashville chooses not to pay their debt service, you would have to go into court and bankruptcy court.
That's a bad thing. Okay, so we're glad that's never come anywhere near us. Good question on that one.
No, and that hardly ever happens in the municipal market because it's very bad press. It's the type of press that you probably can't get rid of for 20, 30 years.
Wow, decades. And then can you speak just a little bit to bond ratings and how those are done and where we stand on the rating scale?
Yes. So bond ratings is part of our debt issuance process, and what we do there is we engage third-party credit rating agencies that are independent and are expected to provide a true, factual rating on what they believe the risk of us not paying. Luckily for Metro Nashville, we are a very highly rated credit. We're considered AA, which is considered very high. Anything below a triple B is considered very bad, and that's it. I mean, it requires, I guess the process in general requires a lot of interviews, presentations. They require a lot of documentation. They go through the financials, and they take a deep dive into our government and our structure and how Metro Council approves and the taxing power of the government.
So if the taxing power is limited, how does that affect bond ratings?
It will definitely affect the bond ratings in terms of lowering your credit, just like it would with a credit score. And what that means for municipal government is that if you have limited ability to raise your taxes or pay your bills, then your credit ratings will be lower. And so when you go to market, your interest costs for debt will be much higher, just like it would be for an individual who has bad credit.
Gotcha. So it costs more to build in that case. So we want to keep our credit rating good. Thank you. That's important information. Any other questions? We're good. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Bosch. We appreciate that. So we've kind of seen how we go from identifying projects we would like to have built to picking and prioritizing the ones that actually do get built, and then ultimately how they are paid for through our bond program. So I appreciate that, that explanation. And Rosie, if I could ask you to bring my slideshow up for just a second. I'm clearly the least technically savvy in the room, and I could get it on that screen, but not on the big screen. And that's why. There it is. If you can punch through to the next pie chart, right there. So I just want people to see that part of our process in our budget is to have an operating budget. That's what we spend money on in day-to-day operations. The biggest chunk of that, as I said, is education. The next biggest chunk is public safety, and then the next two biggest chunks are debt service, which is what we've just had explained to us, is our way for paying for the important things that we want to build, like libraries and parks and fire stations and new police precincts, and then all the sidewalks and road paving. All those things fit into that category. So we're able to do them as we need them and then pay for them as part of our operating budget. It shows up in our debt service and then general government. Okay, thank you. That's. I just wanted to put that all in context. And now, do you have the next projections coming up? And now we're going to hear from Ms. Patel, who is going to tell us about something very new to Metro budgeting that we are really excited about, called the Budget Equity Tool. So welcome to Budget 101.
Thank you. I am Sneh Patel. I serve as a research analyst in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion within Metro. So equity is one of the key principles guiding the budget process for the 2023 fiscal year. As the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and as a division of the Finance Department, we play a key role in facilitating the integration of equity into budget considerations, as well as training others to not only understand equity, but to see the role that equity, diversity, and inclusion plays within each department. This year, each department will need to justify how specific investments will further equity when submitting a budget modification request. Additionally, each department will complete a budget equity tool and submit that to our office. The budget equity tool is a product that our office created and the beginning of a process for each department to incorporate equity-focused thinking into department operations and services. The tool is designed to determine whether budget allocations advance equitable outcomes, to measure the impact of budget decisions on equities within the city, and improve performance and service delivery. So the tool itself is a set of 3 strategies and corresponding questions that will guide departments to identify its equity priorities and how to develop targeted and data-driven strategies to implement them. The 3 strategies are adopt an equity lens, be data-driven, and finally, promote assessment and accountability. With that first strategy, we are trying to move away from departments thinking about how a budget request will impact everyone or all people within Metro, but really get them to deconstruct who are the specific groups who stand to benefit or be harmed by budget modifications. The second strategy, be data-driven. This is where we ask departments to use a specific form of data that looks at separate population groups and spatial distribution of those groups as well, and services, to understand which neighborhoods, which geographic areas, and even which employees are prioritized in the budget. Finally, each department will need to build into their equity plan a way to evaluate and measure progress on their equity goals. Here is an area where we highlighted a place for engagement with the community, something that our office definitely wants to be a part of and helping to set up for each department and successfully execute. Assessment should take place throughout the year, and this is a really important way that departments can stay accountable not only to themselves, but to our office and Metro residents. The 3 strategies are meant to work together and build off one of each other so each department can begin to develop their plan so they can see how a specific budget modification might require specific forms of data to implement and a way to measure how that assess how that plan is going on later on. So here you can see an excerpt of what the actual tool that we sent to each Metro department looks like and an example of one of the questions. Each department is given the space provided for their response. Every question has to be answered for the tool to be considered complete. And in total, there are 9 questions that they have to look at. The questions cover topics such as staffing and promotion practices, spatial and demographic distribution of resources, and how departments will collect and use data to assess their progress toward their equity goals. When creating this tool, our office looked at different iterations of this tool. I know that some council members are familiar with what San Antonio has done. But while we were looking at what they did and trying to identify the best practices for Metro, we wanted to keep it central to Nashville and really the issues that are happening right now in the city. And we also took into consideration recent and ongoing events like the impact of COVID and natural disasters, as well as how Nashville's continued growth will shape equity considerations. So our office has created a number of resources within the tool packet to assist each department as they complete the budget equity tool. For instance, to support each department in understanding how to use and integrate population data into their equity plans, we provide several data sources, both internal to Metro and some external sources as well. I want to highlight 2 of those resources, the Davidson County Demographic Atlas and the DEI Equity Dashboards. The Atlas is a product of collaboration between our division and various members across Metro, and it's a series of maps that display different demographic and socioeconomic indicators spatially and where these characteristics overlap across the Metro region. Our office has also created several dashboards that look at specific issues such as workforce preparedness or affordability in Nashville. These tools, along with the other data sources, can help departments understand the different levels of access some neighborhoods and communities have to Metro services and how their department can work to alleviate disparities. We also anticipate that some departments will have their own internal data that they can use to help shape their equity strategies. Our office is experienced with each of these sources, and we can provide guidance to any department who's interested in learning how to use them or how to most effectively understand the information presented. And we've also provided links to all the data sources on our webpage for anyone who wants to explore them. In addition to the information within the tool packet, our office created a Budget Equity 101 training video where we go through each element of the budget equity tool. Part of the training is a review of just what equity is and how we define it, and how equity is relevant to each department and really why it's important to Nashville. We go over each of the strategies and questions in depth and what would be considered a successful response to each question. For each question, we also provide prompts or relevant examples of how these questions relate maybe to an equity issue or the budget process in general. One thing we really emphasize in the training is the need for specific, result-oriented, and data-driven proposals that can be tracked or measured. We also stress that departments don't have to consider this something they need to do alone, that our office there is to assist them and aid them and answer any questions about the process. I just want to end with saying that the budget equity tool is part of an ongoing process to establish equitable practices and policies within Metro. Our office is going to review each budget equity tool that each department submits and give feedback on any modifications they can make before they finalize that. We're also going to assess each department's progress on their equity goals quarterly. This is a way for us to help identify where they will be able to be successful in achieving their equity goals, but also where our office can help them address unmet goals. This tool is just a continuation of some of the work that's already been started with several departments and the beginning of a partnership with each department to realize their equity goals and vision. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. This is, it's exciting that this has become an official process for Metro to go through, as opposed to just saying we want to do things equitably. So we appreciate y'all giving us definite ways to do that. I do have a couple of questions that I will ask from the audience. First is, as you're evaluating, will you differentiate the degree of equity in a proposal, or is it simply something is equitable and not equitable?
So one of the things we do emphasize in the training is that there are different levels and forms of equity. So that's something we want each department to not only be aware of, but something that we can give feedback to them in there as well.
Gotcha. And then can you give an example of a request that might on its face appear to be equitable but isn't? And this is going to be a two-step process of giving us a better feel for what we mean by equity, but what's an example of something that might appear but actually isn't?
So one of the reasons that we make that data is one of the significant strategies and what we call equity-based data is that when you make statements that a project may benefit all or everyone or improve everything for Nashville, that's really overlooking the realities that certain communities or groups might not be able to access those resources in general. So those, one of the things that we say in the training is avoid being vague, avoid generalizations, and really think about, like, whether it be an addition to your budget or if you have to make a reduction, who's really going to face specific significant burdens to be able to access things within Metro. And in some places, it can be more complicated. So for instance, how we've been delivering services with the ongoing COVID impact. It could be equitable or a great way for the employees, but it could put certain burdens on members of the community who are trying to access those services.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And then just to back up for a second, because I think it is easy. Since decades ago, I think we spoke in terms of equality, and we have slowly come to realize that equality is not necessarily giving people what they need to be successful. That equity is looking at what the different needs are and trying to supply what's needed to be successful. I use the example of my children. My youngest daughter had trouble learning how to read, and we discovered that, did lots of tutoring. That enabled her to read. My two older children couldn't see. And so if we had just said, oh, everybody needs glasses, that would have helped two of them, but not one of them. Or, oh, everybody needs tutoring, that would have helped one of them, but not two of them. So as you go to the different departments, can you speak just a little bit about how we help people understand what equity means in, let's just say, for example, at the library. What does equity mean at the library?
So your story actually brings up a really good demonstration of something that we go over through the training, and that's the difference between equality and equity. And equality really, it does like everybody would get glasses, but that's assuming that everyone's background and experiences are the same, which in that case, you have someone who needs those glasses and has been, disadvantaged in a way for that. Equity really asks everyone to think about the historical and current structures that are causing people to have those different experiences. So for instance, if you go to both the Atlas and you look at the dashboards we're creating, you can see where red line neighborhoods are in Nashville. And then you can go ahead and look at how things like poverty, vehicle access, internet access, all these different things that affect not only your daily life, but your ability to maybe get to that library or to have access, like the materials you need to access those resources. That can all be put down to a historical and structural reality that only certain Nashvillians experienced. And even with more and more people coming in with Nashville, that experience is getting very varied. The stories are different, and it's going to be experienced very differently. So that's something that we're thinking about with equity. So for instance, just translatable services, or we were discussing something with internet access, the move to mobile or more technological advancements, that can create new avenues and new bridges for people to access resources. But then there are some communities who are going to say, the old way was better, I don't know how to work with this. And that's what an equity lens and an equity consideration is going to ask each department to tackle and to think about how their budget can address those issues.
Thank you. And one final question I have. If I heard you correctly, this lens is to be applied to changes to the current budget, so we're not asking every department to go back and redo their entire budget, but for our starting exercise and learning how to do this, we're saying any new change in your budget needs to go through the equity lens, but ultimately perhaps we'll work towards everything Metro does should be processed through an equity lens as we make those decisions?
So right now, in the online submission format where they have to submit budget modifications, they will be required to submit an equity justification.
For a modification.
For a modification.
Gotcha.
And that's going to be very concise. It's not going to be the entire tool. The idea is that the tool is going to get them to, one, look at their overall practices within there, and including the budget, but also how to answer those questions so that when you're thinking about, like, okay, we're going to add new staff to an area, we're opening a new center, like how are we going to make sure that that's going to be something that specific groups or neighborhoods are going to be able to access? Like who's getting those priorities in the budget?
Gotcha.
And this is their first time doing it. So with it, it plans to evolve so that we're probably going to see what works, what doesn't, where we get the best feedback. So while we're very happy with the tool right now, we know that there's probably integration in the budget processes is going to be evolving.
Very good. Thank you. Any other comments from other participants or whatever? I think that's I am proud of Nashville that we have made this an official part of our process. I think that's great. Well, Councilmember Suara, who is participating virtually tonight, often starts her statements about the budget as the budget is a moral document, and this is one way that we make sure that we're setting our priorities according to what the greatest needs are. So I look forward to seeing more about how that works. With that, having been very efficient, and I appreciate everyone covering your materials quickly and efficiently, we are done with tonight's. We are set to have a citizen panel next Wednesday at the same time, 7 o'clock, so hopefully people will join us for that just to hear what the budget means to regular folks and how we can ensure that we make this year's budget meet those needs. We are adjourned. Thank y'all so much.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.